This class will focus on the issues like rise of Mahatma Gandhi, the controversies associated with the emergence of Gandhiji as the supreme leader of national struggle, the nature and character of Gandhian movement, and finally the contribution or significance of Gandhian movement in the history of India's struggle against British rule. Let us start with introduction. Gandhiji or Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi was born on 2nd October 1869 at Porbandar. Porbandar was a small princely state at that time. His father, Karamchand Gandhi, was Diwan of the state of Porbandar. Gandhiji received his early education locally. Then he went on to pursue law in London. He studied law in University College London. So that's the early part of Gandhian life, of Gandhiji's life. Gandhiji went to South Africa in 1893 as a lawyer of Dadu Abdullah. So he went to South Africa to represent Dadu Abdullah, a Gujarati merchant. He went there for one case, but he stayed there till 1914, or for the next 21 years he was in South Africa. He returned India in January 1915. That is considered to be the Pravasi Bharatiya Divas at present. So this is the early phase of Gandhiji's life. Mahatma Gandhi, the father of nation. Mahatma Gandhi emerged as a supreme leader of national struggle during the course of 1920. He returned from South Africa in January 1915, and during or by, you can say, 1919-20, Gandhiji was the supreme leader of Indian national movement, or India's struggle against British rule. What led to the rise of Mahatma Gandhi? What were the factors responsible for his rise? That has been a matter of controversy among scholars. The controversy about the rise of Mahatma Gandhi was triggered by English historian Judith Margaret Brown. She wrote a book in 1972, and in her book, titled as Rise of Mahatma Gandhi, Indian Politics. So in her book titled as Rise of Mahatma Gandhi, Indian Politics, she emphasized that the rise of Mahatma Gandhi was the result of a highly skillful top level political game. So she said that rise of Mahatma Gandhi was the result of a political game. She emphasized that Gandhiji manipulated the prevailing circumstances and he rose to throne by pushing the others aside. This throne was the leadership of India's national struggle. So she emphasized that it was a result of manipulation. It was a result of a top-level skillful game. It was not the result of acceptance of Gandhiji's leadership by the people of India. So this interpretation of Judith Brown triggered a serious controversy among scholars. Colonial historians supported Judith Brown because condemning Mahatma Gandhi was like character assassination of India's freedom struggle. That these Indian politicians were just manipulators, they were just playing game with each other, and they were not really serious nationalists. But the truth lies somewhere else. A closer examination of the circumstances in which Gandhiji emerged reveals that it was neither sudden nor the result of any one particular factor. So a closer examination, that's how you need to connect the parts of question or the arguments of circumstances in which Mahatma Gandhi emerged as the supreme leader of national struggle. Clearly reveals that His rise was neither sudden nor unexpected. His rise was the result of a long process of gradual evolution. And this process of evolution of Gandhiji's rise started in South Africa, not in India. So his rise had started in South Africa. His success in South Africa had transformed him into a national hero in India. And from there to 1920, it was a gradual process. He did not become the leader of national struggle suddenly, or one fine day the sun broke out and Gandhiji was suddenly the supreme leader of national movement. That was not the case. So interpretation of Judith Margaret Brown or the other colonial historians does not hold ground when we put their interpretations or their arguments to a closer examination in the light of the prevailing circumstances. What were the factors responsible for the rise of Mahatma Gandhi? The factor number one that prepared ground for the rise of Mahatma Gandhi was the success of his experiments in South Africa. Gandhiji reached South Africa in 1893. For the next 21 years, he fought against the white racism, he fought against the discrimination against native blacks and the Indian browns who had reached Africa, who were carried to Africa as indentured labor. Most of them were originally carried as indentured labor. So the success of Gandhian experiments in South Africa had transformed him into a national hero in India. So he was not an ordinary individual when he returned from South Africa. He was a national hero. When Gandhiji visited different parts of India, thousands used to flock to the bus stands and railway stations to have a glimpse of this great soul. So Gandhiji did not start his political journey in India from zero, from scratch. He was already a national hero in India when he returned from South Africa in January 1915. So he did not get the fame suddenly. He worked hard for 21 years in South Africa to earn that fame. Next factor, failure of moderates and extremists. By 1920, both the moderates and the extremists had lost their mass appeal. The moderates were too weak to be effective. The extremists largely sounded hollow. They made big claims, speeches were aggressive, but the result on ground was very limited. So moderates were too weak to be effective and the extremists largely sounded hollow. The people in India were looking for some alternative. They were looking for change. And this quest for change was fulfilled by the emergence of Mahatma Gandhi. Or this quest for change hastened the process of rise of Mahatma Gandhi. People were already looking for a different leadership. And when Mahatma Gandhi emerged on the scene, they accepted him as their national hero. So that's how you have to connect the arguments, analyze the points. So it was not the case of capturing leadership. It was the case that the earlier generations of leaders had lost their mass appeal. People were looking for change. People had turned their face away from moderates and extremists towards someone who could fulfill their expectations, who could stand true to their expectations. Gandhiji was that leader who proved the perfect man in those circumstances. Third fact, the economic hardships being faced by people. After the outbreak of World War I, World War I commenced in July 1914. The economic sufferings or the economic hardships of people in India had increased enormously because the items of common use, the food materials and other necessities of common people were being exported by the British colonial regime of India to different parts of the world to meet the requirements of British military forces. So, food grains and other materials were being exported without paying any attention to the needs of Indians. And because of this policy of British colonial regime, the sufferings of Indians had increased enormously by 1919-20. This suffering, this economic hardship intensified the pain, intensified the discontent prevailing in the heart and mind of common Indians against British rule. And this intensification of discontent also played an important role in rise of Mahatma Gandhi. Because people were looking for somebody who was more aggressive, somebody who could understand their pulse. And Mahatma Gandhi was a perfect leader who did not mince words while criticizing the colonial rule. So people pushed them towards a new leadership. And that new leadership that was perfect for the time was the leadership of Mahatma Gandhi. Fact number 4, the British policy of repression and suppression was at its peak. After the outbreak of World War I, Indians supported the British wholeheartedly. In war efforts. The Indian support was wholehearted in war efforts. Leaders like Mahatma Gandhi and Gopal Krishna Gokhale traveled across the length and breadth of India to persuade the younger generation or Indian youth to join armed forces. The British colonial government needed a large number of soldiers. So Mahatma Gandhi and Gopal Krishna Gokhale, as well as the other leaders, they traveled across the length and breadth of India to convince the Indian young boys to join armed forces. More than 1.3 million Indians had served in World War I. So the number was very, very huge. This number was mobilized from India. So Indians were cooperating with the British in every possible way during war period. The Indians believed that wartime cooperation would result in reforms, would result in constitutional reforms, economic reforms for the betterment of Indians. So Indians were expecting reforms, Indians were expecting more liberty after the end of war. But what Indians got? The end of war was followed by extreme repression. The policy of suppression and repression attained a new height after the end of war. What were the examples? The end of the war was followed by enactment of Rowlatt Act. The Rowlatt Act was proposed in March 1917. It was enacted in March 1919. When Indians gathered to oppose Rowlatt Act, thousands of innocent civilians were massacred in Jallianwala Bagh on 13th April 1919 at the orders of General Dyer. People were celebrating Baisakhi. Some had gathered to oppose the enactment of Rowlatt Act. General Dyer brought forces and without any warning opened fire on that peaceful gathering. Official figure is in hundreds, but in reality, thousands of Indians lost their life in Jallianwala Bagh. So what Indians got in return of this wartime cooperation was Rowlatt Act and Jallianwala Bagh massacre. So this policy of suppression and repression that had attained new height after the end of war forced the Indians to rise and fight against British rule. They needed a new leader who could take on the British rule with full strength. And that leader of great mettle or special charisma was Mahatma Gandhi. So Mahatma Gandhi provided them the leadership at a time when the morale of people was very, very low, when they were looking for a new leadership to take on the British colonial masters. So this policy of suppression and repression also played a very, very important role in creating the circumstances leading to rise of Mahatma Gandhi as the supreme leader of anti-British struggle. Fact number 5, role of leadership vacuum. By 1920, a number of prominent leaders of earlier periods were no more. Many prominent leaders had left this world. Gopal Krishna Gokhale and Firoz Shah Mehta left this world in 1915. Dadabhai Nauroji also died in 1917. In fact, on 1st August 1920, B.G. Tilak also left this world on 01 August 1920. So by 1920, a situation of leadership vacuum had developed in India. And the situation of leadership vacuum also facilitated the rise of Mahatma Gandhi. So this was also a factor in his emergence as the supreme leader of anti-British struggle. Fact number 6. The nature and character of Gandhian movement also played the important role, in fact also played the most important role in the rise of Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi's movement was such that it attracted every section of Indian population towards it. Hindus, Muslims, rich, poor, the tribals, non-tribals, all were attracted towards Mahatma Gandhi. Gandhian movement was non-violent, it was a mass movement. Gandhiji believed in the strength and capacity of common masses. It was a secular movement. It was pan-India in its geographical spread. It was democratic, egalitarian, progressive. So, Gandhian leadership, or the leadership of Mahatma Gandhi, was accepted easily by everyone. That is why Mahatma Gandhi could emerge as the supreme leader of anti-British struggle. We'll see the details about the character of Gandhian movement in the next part. Role of early successes of Gandhian movement in India, or Gandhiji in India. Gandhiji launched Champaran Satyagraha to fight for the rights of indigo cultivators in Champaran region of Bihar in 1917, and he was successful in it. Ahmedabad Mill Satyagraha was organized by Gandhiji in 1918. This was also successful. And then Kheda Satyagraha was organized for the rights of peasants of Kheda, Gujarat, in 1918. This was also successful. So all the three early movements launched by Gandhiji in India were successful. The success of these movements convinced Indians, or convinced common masses, that only Gandhian methods of struggle, that only Gandhian leadership could succeed against British. It was only Gandhiji who was capable enough to bring the British colonial masters to their knee. So people were convinced in the efficacy of Gandhian leadership, and everyone started clamoring for his leadership at the national level. So Gandhiji did not capture the national leadership. In fact, he was pushed by the people to accept the responsibility of national leadership against British rule. So this was the factor responsible for the rise of Mahatma Gandhi. Another factor, factor number 8, there's one more factor that you need to see. Factor number 8, charisma of Mahatma Gandhi. So Gandhian charisma. Gandhiji was a charismatic leader. He was a simple man. He lived like the most ordinary Indians. His food habits, his dress, hardly anything he was wearing. He was easily accessible. Anyone and everyone could connect with him. So Gandhiji was such a leader that anyone and everyone could connect with him. This plays a very, very important role in the popularity of any leader. If people cannot connect with their leader, then leader will never have mass support. He was secular, he was equally disposed to both Hindus and Muslims. He was speaking the language of common people. He was living like the most ordinary of Indians. He was easily accessible, so anyone and everyone could easily connect with Mahatma Gandhi. This connection made him a great charismatic leader, and that Gandhian charisma attracted the classes as well as the masses towards him, and he became the supreme leader of anti-British struggle. Nobody opposed him. So these were the factors. Gandhiji became the supreme leader of anti-British struggle. This was not the case of capturing national leadership, as colonial scholars like Judith Brown tries to portray. Now the nature and character of Gandhian movement. As always, nature and character means what kind of. So what kind of movement was Gandhian movement? Whatever you can fill to complete the sentence, that becomes the nature and character. Salient features, characteristic features, nature, character, all these are going to demand the same The answer is what kind of? So what kind of movement was Gandhian movement? Gandhian movement was characterized by some elements of continuity. Some of the features from moderate phase and extremist phase continued during Gandhian phase also. So those features will remain the same as you have learned in moderates and extremists. Let us see what were those features. The Gandhian movement was a democratic movement, or democratic in nature. You know what is the meaning of democracy, we have discussed it in the previous two phases. The Gandhian movement was egalitarian in outlook. So this is again the same. Gandhian movement was progressive. It was guided by the vision of a better and brighter future, so it was progressive in nature. Gandhian movement was secular. Both Hindus and Muslims respected him equally. He did not make any appeal to any religion to fight against the British rule. Gandhian movement was a multi-class movement. Same as before. Dimension number 6. Gandhian movement was non-violent in nature. Gandhian movement was anti-colonial in its outlook. Gandhian movement was non-sectarian. He was not supporting any particular class, he was supporting whole of India. Of course, the peasant issues, the tribal issues, the issues related to lower caste, etc. were raised by him, but those issues made him truly national in his appeal. Those issues were no longer considered as sectarian. If you fight for the upliftment of women, if you fight for the upliftment of lower classes, if you fight against untouchability, if you fight for the inclusion of tribals in the mainstream society, if you fight for the peasants or workers, those issues were the truly national issues. So those issues did not make anything here sectarian. So these 8 elements of Gandhian movement, these 8 features of Gandhian movement were the same as they were under moderates and extremists. So this is part number 1. If you have to write about Gandhian movement, its nature and character, then all these 8 you have to write one by one. Every point becomes a small paragraph. At times, you can put the numbers, or at times you can leave without a number. That doesn't make any difference. So when you say point form, does not mean that you have to put number 1, 2, 3, 4. Point form means one issue. Underline the keyword, say democratic, egalitarian, progressive, and then write what you have to write. Explanation or elaboration will depend on the length of the question. If question is of 300 words, you can write a couple of sentences of elaboration. And if question is of 150 words, then you have to be very, very precise. Just write the main issue. So some elements were the same as they were under extremists or moderates. At the same time, there were many new elements in Gandhian movement. So some new elements of Gandhian movement can be seen in the form of true mass movement. Gandhian movement was a true mass movement because for the first time, peasants became a part of national struggle. Under the leadership of Gandhiji, participation of peasants in anti-British struggle commenced. So it was a true mass movement. Some more dimensions. Gandhian movement was a true mass movement because the participation of women, of students, and workers, etc. increased enormously. So that was a new element of the character of Gandhian movement. It was a true mass movement. Think of moderate phase, there was no mass participation. Think of extremist phase, that was a mass movement, but not a true mass movement, because there was no participation of peasants in national struggle under extremists. Feature number 2, Gandhian movement was a pan-India movement. So, in terms of its geographical spread, Gandhian movement was a pan-India movement because for the first time, the national struggle reached Indian villages. For the first time, Indian villagers participated in anti-British struggle. So that makes Gandhian movement a pan-India movement. It was no longer limited to towns and cities. The moderates and extremists were urbanites. The movements were largely urban in character. Gandhian movement was a regulated movement. Gandhian movement was based on specific ideas and principles. As and when these ideas were violated, as and when the people started drifting away from these ideas, Gandhiji restrained. Gandhiji restrained his mass movement. This was visible in case of non-cooperation movement. Non-cooperation movement was restrained. NCM was restrained or stopped or was called out by Gandhiji in 1922 when Chauri Chora incident took place. At Chauri Chora on 5th Feb 1922, an angry mob of protesters put a police station on fire, and in that fire, 22 policemen were burnt alive. That's why on 10th of Feb 1922, NCM was suspended, and on 12th of Feb 1922, NCM was withdrawn by Congress at its Bardoli session. So we'll see NCM in detail when we come to the topic, but this is an example of restrainment. Gandhiji restrained his mass movements, yet he retained his popularity among the masses because these restrainments were not arbitrary. These restrainments were the result of the fact that people did not follow the specific ideas and principles which characterized, which guided Mahatma Gandhi's struggle or which guided Gandhian movements. Gandhian movement was essentially an ethical moral struggle. So ZM, Gandhian movement, was characterized by high ethical principles, Gandhiji always believed in the use of right means to achieve the right objectives or right ends. The ends did not justify means to Gandhiji. He always used right means to achieve his right ends. As and when the people tried to use the wrong means, he used to stop or used to restrain the mass movement. So it was essentially an ethical moral struggle because it was guided by high ethical moral principles: truthfulness, compassion, empathy, courage, transparency, accountability. All these were the high moral principles which Gandhiji always followed, which Gandhiji made his followers to abide by those principles. Gandhiji never took advantage of the weaknesses of others. So he did not launch a mass movement when World War I was going on. He did not launch a mass movement in 1939 when Second World War started. So he never took advantage of the weaknesses of others. Gandhi movement was essentially a satyagraha. Satyagraha means the quest or fight for truth. Gandhiji believed that cooperation with good and non-cooperation with evil was the duty of every human being. Gandhiji always opposed wrongs. So Satyagraha also means opposing wrongs. He opposed wrongs without worrying about the consequences. He opposed the white racism in South Africa. He opposed wrongs of British colonial rule in India. He went to jail on dozens of occasions. So he was a fearless crusader for the righteousness, for the good of all. Satyagraha also means fearlessness. He was a fearless crusader. He was a true fighter who was ready to risk everything for the sake of the good or for the sake of right. That's why you see Gandhian movement was essentially a satyagraha. Gandhiji fought against British because he knew that British rule was an evil. He firmly believed in Kantian philosophy that it was a universal moral law that must be followed by everyone. And universal moral law has to be the basis of the law of a state. So the law of a state, that was the law enacted by the British government at that time or any government any time, cannot be higher than the universal moral law. The universal moral law safeguards the liberty of people. The universal moral law expands the scope of liberty of people. Liberty might be economic liberty, could be social liberty, could be political liberty, could be cultural liberty. If any law curtails the liberty of people, that is against the very concept of morality. So Gandhiji believed in that philosophy and he fought against the British rule because British rule was curtailing the liberty of people in India. It was an evil. Use of novel methods. New methods were used by Gandhiji such as hunger strike. He went on a fast many times. Non-cooperation with evil, or in this case British rule, civil disobedience. Peaceful court arrest. Peaceful marches, pedestrian marches. Think of Dandi March. These were the new methods. And these methods were highly effective. These methods touched the heart and mind of common masses, and everyone became his blind follower. Everyone continued to believe Gandhiji and follows Gandhism even today. Use of STS and PCP were also an important feature of Gandhian struggle. STS here stands for struggle, truce, struggle. PCP here stands for pressure, compromise pressure. Gandhiji always used to leave the window of compromise open. He never closed his doors completely. So the window of compromise was always left open. Gandhiji knew that anti-British struggle was going to be long drawn out, and fight had to continue in multiple phases. So whenever the movement used to continue for many months, Gandhiji used to withdraw the movement, Gandhiji used to suspend the movement by using his strategy of his struggle, truce struggle. Truce also reflected the same. It was in the form of calling off or suspension of mass agitation. Struggle means launching of mass agitation. Truce means suspension of mass agitation. So STS and PCP were the essential methods and techniques used by Gandhiji in his struggle against British rule. Now let us see one example of the same. Gandhiji launched Champaran Satyagraha. Satyagraha was launched in 1917. Demand was 100% refund of the fee that was collected, or that had been collected by European planters from the indigo farmers. But when the British agreed to refund 25% of that fee, Gandhiji stopped the movement. Gandhi said his objectives were achieved. So there was a compromise. He did not insist on 100% refund. He said 25% refund is sufficient to shatter the prestige of British. In 1920, he launched non-cooperation movement. In between, there were Ahmedabad Mill and Kheda Satyagraha also. NCM was withdrawn by him in 1922 because of Chori Chora incident. That is compromise or truce. Gandhiji knew that after Chori Chora incident, if he continues the mass movement, then British would come with full force and they will suppress the masses. Gandhiji also knew that this violence was not an indication of his strength. This violence was an indication of frustration of people. In 1930, CDM was launched. CDM was suspended. In 1931, when Gandhiji agreed to participate in round table conference, he came back, restarted CDM, restarted mass agitation. In 1932, CDM was stopped in 1934. So it was a kind of pressure, compromise pressure. It was a struggle, truce struggle. The Gandhian movement was going on a continuous basis. So these strategies were a very, very important part of Gandhian method of struggle. The Gandhian movement was a process, not an event. The Gandhian movement commenced with the launching of Champaran Satyagraha in 1917. Thereafter, this movement continued through active phase and passive phase, or active phases and passive phases, till 1947.